This is the Maruti Suzuki S-Presso. The name is derived from a famous bittersweet Italian coffee, often served as a small shot in a small cup, and that connection is visible the moment you look at the small size of this car. I think the Italians would love it. It's perfect for the narrow roads. Ditto for India. You see, this is not the first time Suzuki is using a coffee reference in naming a car. In the past, they've had a car called the Suzuki Cappuccino. Now, in coffee terms, a cappuccino is much larger than the espresso, but in Suzuki terms, the cappuccino was a Kei car. For those of you who don't know, a Kei car is a body style in Japan that is made for congested roads, tight parking spaces, narrow roads, etc. These are really tiny cars, and yet they are quite fun to drive despite having a small 660cc engine. Now, Maruti Suzuki has had a history of working with Kei cars and modifying them for the Indian market. Alto, WagonR, prime examples. This also is a Kei car. In fact, this is based on the new Hardtech Kei platform. Now, the Hardtech Kei platform underpins the new Japanese Alto, not sold to us in India, but available in Japan. This one, however, again has been modified for the Indian market. The tread is wider to go with the overall dynamics of this car, the height of the car, and the wheelbase is shorter to accommodate a full-size spare wheel that is mandatory in the Indian market. The S-Presso was first previewed as the Future S concept at the 2018 Auto Expo. It had quite a flair with narrow lighting elements, the receding roofline and the muscular wheel arches. The production model of the S-Presso loses out on most of that distinctive styling and has a stronger visual connect with the form, design and detailing of the Vitara Brezza instead. Case in point, the boxy stance, the straight lines, the squared wheel arches, the trapezoidal detailing on the slotted grille and the chunky lighting elements at the front and at the rear. The headlights have a single pot form, while the tail lights with their C motif look quite smart. Maruti has also thrown in these black bumpers to add a hint of toughness to the overall design of this car. You also have a lot of accessories, alloy wheels, cladding, even two body kit options to make the car either look sporty or more SUV-ish. But honestly, with that black bumper, this one looks more like a jacked up base model Alto than a mini SUV. I think a more contrasting color scheme for those 4 skid plates, presence of roof rails, a beefier cladding on the bodywork, that would have sort of made this car stand out. It would have gone with its cause of being the mini SUV. It would have taken the battle to the likes of the Renault Kwid in a more convincing manner. The S-Presso is an inexpensive car, and that shows in its basic form and sometimes leaves you wanting for more. All variants get steel wheels in 13 and 14 inches. In terms of dimensions, the S-Presso is marginally smaller than the Kwid and a full size smaller than the KUV 100. With a longer wheelbase and a taller height than its hatchback siblings, the S-Presso is a roomier alternative to the Suzuki Alto and the Alto K10. I think the cabin also looks much better. I think Maruti Suzuki has a thing for Mini. The kind of dual tone color options that they give you or the decal options, it's very similar. It has an uncanny resemblance to the customization options offered by Mini Coopers. And the moment you step inside the cabin, you will see even more Mini connection in this particular car. Now, Maruti Suzuki insists that this dashboard design is inspired by sport watches, the round dial, chunky buttons and all of that. But it's evident it is inspired by Mini Cooper, especially this huge round bezel that you get on the center console, the round bezels that you get on either sides of the dashboard. All of that is very Mini, but it also looks quite nice. I think it looks quite funky. You get it in orange shade only with the orange exterior shade. On the other colors or in lower trims, you have a satin gray. But this looks quite nice, and right at the center of it is a touchscreen infotainment system, the same system that you also get in the WagonR. The infotainment is the same as the WagonR. Its placement attracts a lot of glare, and while the display isn't the crispest, the touchscreen is slick and more feature-rich than the competition, with support for external apps, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Sitting on top of the infotainment is the instrumentation, and frankly, it looks quite good. It uses old school orange colors, but they really go well with the cabin and the overall design. Look closely at the instrumentation and you will see that there is a segmented pattern on the sides which is not being used right now. What that is, what is that going to be used for? Looks like a gauge to me of some sort. We'll come to know by January 2020. So that's a scoop for you. As for the instrumentation, I think it looks quite nice. It's got a big digital speedometer on top, a digital multi-info display right in the center. Now, the placement of this instrumentation is not in its conventional position. Now, if this is going to be your first car, you may not like the unconventional placement of this. It is different than probably the car that you learn driving on. However, let me tell you, it's just a matter of getting used to. It doesn't feel unsafe or distracting or unnerving in any sense. One small glance at it, it will tell you the speed, it will tell you all the info that you need to know from the instrumentation. So in that sense, it is placed quite nice. It's also not intrusive in your peripheral vision, which is again a good thing. Thankfully, unlike some of the other cars that use a similar placement and a similar layout, Maruti Suzuki haven't used this space behind the steering wheel to create additional storage spaces, so that's a very good thing. Otherwise, people would usually keep their phones here, and that is very distracting and in turn unsafe. So your phone safely goes into the little spaces that you have right here in the tunnel console. There are enough storage spaces for knickknacks and 1-liter bottles, and all of them are easy to access. The boot space is exceptionally good too, and should have decent space even after the CNG variant comes along. All controls inside the cabin fall easily at hand, and the top trim has steering mounted audio and telephony controls. In fact, the materials and the fit and finish is phenomenal for this entry-level price point that this car resides in. In fact, there are no exposed cables anywhere, no real signs of low-cost engineering. The footwells are generously sized as well. That's something that a lot of you had a concern about, especially after looking at the brochure images. But no, let me confirm, the footwells are generously sized. There is enough knee room in here for the driver as well as the front passenger. The large door and fairly high seating also makes ingress and egress very easy, especially for older people, who too are the target audience for this car. The rear seat is a flat bench to accommodate 2 adults in comfort and maybe squeeze a kid in between them. That's about it, but the space is phenomenal. Headroom, excellent. Knee room is superb. The seat is completely retracted backward, and that is the kind of space that I get. And because the seat is set so high, you get a decent amount of foot space as well. So under thigh support is not really a worry. However, the flat contouring is a matter of worry with long distance comfort. I'm not sure if it's going to be very comfortable. And the bigger worry, however, is this. Very small. I don't know what kind of whiplash protection am I going to get in case there's a rear end collision. As far as the windows are concerned, they're nice and large. The window line is quite low, so that is why getting a clear view outside of the windows is quite easy as well. And on the topic of safety, the seats do not get any ISOFIX child seat mounts. Getting back into the driver's seat, I really like the commanding view that this car offers. It's taller than most other hatchbacks that you will buy in this particular space, and that is something that a lot of you will like, and that is something that a lot of you are already expecting since this car calls itself a mini SUV. The A-pillar, it's quite slim. Even the wing mirror is quite small, so this geometry doesn't really intrude into your vision, your peripheral vision, cornering vision. There's a nice airy feel to the cabin, and there's a nice airy feel to the kind of visibility that it offers you as well. So from a first-timer's perspective, this is very good news. Now, there are a couple of problems or a couple of things that I would like to draw your attention to. One of which is the inside rearview mirror. I think it's optically incorrect. It's been giving me that groggy sensation every time I look at it, especially at highway speeds. It tends to vibrate a bit as well. So it's giving me a very uncomfortable, discomforting feeling in that sense. The second problem is with the seat itself. It's pretty flat in terms of its contouring, and that's a bit of a worry. This car, it does feel a little under-tired, and at highway speeds, it starts feeling a little wallowy as well. And with the kind of seat height that you get, you're sitting, or you get a feeling that you're sitting atop the drivetrain, and that sort of accentuates the whole feeling when the car starts behaving in a wallowy manner. Had the seat been given slightly stiffer cushioning, slightly better bolstering that fits you snugly, then it increases that sense of security, and that is something that I'm missing with this particular seating configuration. Apart from that, I think this is a nice place to be in. In fact, highway speeds isn't the S-Presso's thing. 60 to 80 kilometers an hour is the happy zone for this car. Beyond that, The engine gets shouty, the handling dynamics start feeling unnerving, and the steering also refuses to weigh up, adding to that nervousness. So in a typical K car fashion then, this is more of a city car, and hitting the highway often with this, and triple digit speeds in fact, are something that the car feels nervous doing. The engine is rev happy though, and is the BS6 compliant 1-litre 3-cylinder petrol engine from the Alto K10. It can be had with a 5-speed manual or the automated manual transmission. The automated manual transmission in newer cars like the Swift has set the bar really high for Maruti Suzuki, and from that standpoint, the AGS in this particular car, the AMT in this particular car feels a bit old school. There is a pronounced head nod, especially at part throttle when you're moving from first to second or second to third and even third to fourth. Do it at highway speeds or essentially do it at a harder throttle input and the shifts are much smoother. Even the shift from fourth to fifth is particularly quite smooth, but lower down the order it is quite pronounced. Also at creeping speeds, 10, 15 kilometers an hour, 20 kilometers an hour, there is that pulsating feedback or the pulsating power delivery that is very pronounced. It again reminds you that this is a characteristic of 3-cylinder engines with AMTs, especially in the Maruti stable. The gearbox is quick to downshift by up to 2 gears when you put your foot down for an overtake, and the quick revving nature of this engine helps build speed quickly on this light car. When you're driving at city speeds or with part throttle inputs, the automated gearbox tends to shift up to higher gears as soon as possible to maximize fuel economy. So you'll find yourself often cruising at 40 kilometers an hour in 4th gear or 50 kilometers an hour in 5th gear. Now at these speeds, the revs aren't very high. The engine doesn't feel like it's out of breath or that it's going to start knocking, but there is a pronounced booming sound that fills into the cabin, and that sort of gets annoying, forcing you to move into the manual mode and then settling for a lower gear. In the city environment, you won't need to use the manual shifting often, as the AGS is quite nicely tuned for urban driving conditions. We didn't quite get a chance to drive the manual transmission for a long distance, but it has the same slick shifts and a light clutch pedal that we've experienced even on the WagonR. In fact, the S-Presso is very similar to the WagonR in a lot of respects and can be looked upon as a more economical alternative to the WagonR, both by private customers as well as cab operators. The steering, as I mentioned earlier, remains light even at highway speeds, and I would have liked a little bit more precision to be able to feel more confident while driving this car, especially around the twisties. But for city use, it is quite well weighted. Most of you are going to love it. Most of you are going to love the convenience that it offers at city speeds. What I really love about this car in terms of its dynamics overall is the braking manners of this car. Like right now, I'm just braking for these sudden surprises in the middle of the road, and the braking is very progressive. Despite the skinny tires, the car stops well, the brake pedal has a progressive feel to it, and at the same time there is no pronounced nosedive. For the kind of ride height that this car has, I was expecting that there will be a lot of nosedive under heavy braking, but there frankly isn't, and even with a full house, the car brakes quite well, which is good news. In relative terms, the S-Presso handles brakes and changes direction better when there are 4 people on board. So do take a test drive with and without your family before making a buying decision. To answer the question that a lot of you enthusiasts out there asked us, is this as fun to drive as the Alto K10? Well, it's the same Igor engine, but the driving dynamics just don't match up. This car feels tall and unnerving around bends, and the steering responses are just not quick enough. So from that point of view, no. But then again, driving fun isn't the intent of this car. What it is a more practical alternative, a practical approach to the Alto. With its better ground clearance, it has better capability of taking on broken roads, and the roomier cabin just makes it a much better car than any other entry-level hatchback. So from that point of view, I think it will garner a lot of interest, a lot of takers in the rural areas, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, and in the cosmopolitan markets. Yes, it has enough equipment to attract a lot of young consumers and a lot of first-timers. And if the kind of response that this car has been getting on this drive in Rajasthan is anything to go by, I think Maruti has a car that could generate a lot of interest going forward.